you needed from me out here?
Is there a discount for multiple boxes on the bag? Did you say no?
No, because
Hell to the no.
we did our math, and that's what we need. So if we do that, then we have to figure out. We'll give you $1 off.
Buck, what am I gonna do with a buck?
Then you can say you got a discount.
It's not good enough.
I guess you didn't hear Gary's joke. What's the difference between a buck and the Bengals?
A buck in the what?
A buck and the
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It's Monday, October 21st, 2019. It's 9:01 a.m. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Fort Myers Beach Town Council. Councilmember Hossafras has an excused absence. If you would please stand for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance.
We gather to make decisions for our community. May we use only our best skills and judgment, keeping ourselves impartial and neutral as we consider the merits and pitfalls of each matter that is placed before us, and always act in accordance with what is best for our community and our fellow citizens. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We do have a change to the agenda. Administrative agenda item A, there was a typo, a Scribner's error, AKA typo, and we are replacing that resolution to reflect that it is Town Resolution 18-32, not 19-32. May I have a motion for the approval of the final agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
I'm sorry, let me just get here to the vote for the final agenda. If you would, please, I'll try and do this better. And the motion carries unanimously, I assume, waiting on Mr. Butcher. There we go. Okay. Next item on the agenda is public comment. This is public comment, and the person that I see waiting to speak is Mr. Veach. Bill? It's actually, oh, so you're here for advisory committees, okay? Is there any? Well, yes, sir, and you're welcome to. This is public comment. If you would, come to the podium. Would somebody else like to speak? Go ahead.
Questions?
Sir, if you
Yep, speak.
say your name first, please. Thank you very
Jonathan
much.
Gunther.
Jonathan Gunther.
Yep. I did not attend any of the previous meetings where discussion about the Laguna Shores drainage project occurred. And in the last meeting, it seems like the residents were not given any opportunity to make public comment or to ask questions after it appears the final decision was made to move forward with the North Lagoon Road.
Sir, I'm just going to stop you there for 1 second just to make a correction for the record. There were 2 opportunities for public comment, but go ahead.
It was not open from what I understand, but I wasn't there, so I'll take your word for it.
Thank you.
We in Laguna Shores just found out about this project on September 24th, I believe, at the meeting to discuss the agenda for it. I'm just curious when the actual public meetings were held regarding this project prior to its approval and the contract being let. It seems to me, since it has a significant impact in our neighborhood, we should have been made aware that this project was upcoming and had a chance to question and comment on it at a time when it would have been meaningful rather than after the contract was let. Do we know when that was?
Sir, we
'Cause
don't
we weren't aware of it.
we don't ask and answer questions during public comment,
Okay,
but I
all
will
right.
have
Okay,
the manager
all right,
comment.
very good. I've never done this before, so I'm
That's
not quite
okay.
sure of the
That's
procedure.
all right. You're
Yep.
doing just fine, but just so
Yep.
you know, I'll have the manager comment on that
Okay.
afterwards. Thank you.
Okay. There have been some discrepancies regarding whether or not that North Lagoon Road drainage line was absolutely necessary. Originally, we were told that it was not. Now we're told that it is to relieve pressure on the Buccaneer Drive drainage system. I think somebody from Tetra Tech stated that if we didn't have it, that 18 inches of water would be the result on Buccaneer Drive. That's kind of a ridiculous statement. I don't think you could put 18 inches of water anywhere in Laguna Shores and not have it run off immediately. It really does not have a serious drainage problem. I understand the need to drain Estero Boulevard, I question whether or not through Laguna Shores and into Buccaneer Lagoon is the best way to do it. Buccaneer Lagoon is a small body of water. If, as Tetra Tech stated, 18 inches of water would flood Buccaneer Drive, that's a tremendous volume of water to introduce to a small, ecologically sensitive body of water. Buccaneer Lagoon has many mangroves on the east side of it. It is a fish nursery. There are all kinds of juvenile fish in the lagoon. It's a favorite hangout spot for manatees and dolphin. I'm just curious if an ecological study was done regarding the effects of dumping that kind of volume of water into a small tidal basin like Buccaneer Lagoon. The water does not move in and out very fast there, and dumping pesticide, fertilizer, petroleum product, contaminated water into it, I think will have serious negative impacts to its ecology.
Okay, Mr. Gunther, thank you.
Okay.
I have to ask you to wrap up your comments.
Okay. All right. I guess that's all I have now, for now. I do have questions, but I will email them, I think.
Yes, Mr. Gunther was going to ask you, there's a sign-in paper over there. If you could just give Michelle your email address and/or phone so we can contact you. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? John Cucciardo?
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
if you could just tell Mr. Gunther that there's another opportunity to speak at the end of the meeting, again,
there is.
if you'd like to speak.
Yes. No, sir, no one was denied any opportunity to speak. Mr. Gucciardo, would you like to go ahead?
And my apologies, I thought I had signed up electronically, but
That's,
I'm
you
not
did.
seeing it.
You're
Oh,
right
okay.
here. Look.
Thank you.
Let's see if I do something with
That's
this.
okay. Getting used to the new system.
You're in here.
John Gucciardo on the record, representing TPI Hospitalities in Margaritaville Resort.
Thank you, John.
I understand that you'll be receiving for review the recommendations from the Public Safety Committee regarding the traffic circulation at the base of the bridge, and we want to acknowledge the committee and the good work that they've done and encourage the council to keep on the dialogue with the committee before any permanent recommendations are made. From that, we think there are some very interesting options that they've talked about that's worth further deliberation. We do have some concerns about one of the options, and obviously this isn't the forum to get down into the details, but the option regarding turning 5th Street into a one-way off the island would have a severe negative impact on the vehicle traffic leaving the resort. But there are options there to address that and corrections that can be made. So we just encourage you to keep that dialogue on, and we know you'll come to a satisfactory conclusion. The second thing we want to address today is a press release that we issued last week. And just to reiterate for the council and for anyone listening, that TPI Hospitalities does,
Gentlemen, thank you. Go ahead,
sorry,
John.
that TPI Hospitalities does fully intend to proceed on all fronts with construction of the Margaritaville Resort project as soon as we are able to. There are also some rumors that you may or may not be aware of on the island. We want to address those up front and dispel any fears that people might have. TPI Hospitality in Margaritaville have absolutely no intention of coming back in front of council to ask for an amendment or additions to the approved project. Hopefully, whoever is circulating that rumor will get the message, and people can rest assured that we are very happy with the approved project and intend to build the approved project as soon as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Is there anyone else who would care to speak? Yes, sir. I haven't heard the rumor either. Good morning.
I wish it was. I'm saddened and I'm
Sir,
burdened.
if you could just say your name for the record.
James Shannon,
Thank you, Mr.
8060 Lagoon Road, Fort Myers Beach.
Thank you.
I've been there for 30 years. I built a beautiful piece of property that's about to be destroyed. I do not appreciate it. I don't feel we've been given any word to speak here before, that we were denied it. When we came to the informational meeting, I was told if we had a petition that showed that the majority of the people, I've been there 30 years, we've never had so much as a puddle there. If we had the petitions of the majority of people, that we could stop it. We presented those petitions, which were totally ignored. This whole project is all about money. That's all it is. It's a waste of money. You were offered an alternative where the engineer claimed that, yes, we could do this without tearing down everybody's trees, shrubs, and destroying our property and the value of our property, and that it could be run down the road without drainage, that they didn't need it, the drainage, they just needed the pipe. But that was totally ignored of what his advice was, and I think it cost a whole lot cheaper. Now, we're going into people's yards, and we're going to put big drainage pipes into there for no reason. We're spending, I'd like to know where the money goes. I'd like to know if anybody's auditing this whole project. We weren't informed about this meeting until the last minute, and when I asked, when are you going to start the project, I was told tomorrow. Now, I've watched this island for 30 years, and I try not to get involved in it because, to me, it stinks. I smell a rat. All we seem to do is the special interest people get what they want. The carpetbaggers that come in from out of town, they get what they want. The residents have never heard. You don't care about us. You don't want to hear from us. When you salute the flag, you make a mockery of the flag that I fought for, that I shed blood for, that I lost friends to. If you're a representative government, who do you represent? You represent the residents, the people here, the people that live here, that call this home. I thought I was going to die in my house, but now I'm selling my house as soon as you're done with this project. I'm getting out of here. And you'll probably like that because you don't give a damn about the residents. You sit up there, you don't allow us to speak, and that's the thing that pissed us all off the most. The other thing is you're having this meeting at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning. People work. They got to work to pay the taxes, to keep up our homes that you make money on. This whole thing. Our houses are valued for our landscaping as well. When you get done, you've just devalued my house. Give me the red light. I know that I'm wasting my time here. I know that it falls on deaf ears. It was a done deal to begin with. And I think you all need to be, this whole thing needs to be investigated, and I plan on pursuing that. And I'll tell you another thing. People made false accusations about me. I had 4 encounters with the sheriff's department, including a SWAT team, to block off my house and come up and question me. Now, you've got someone who said that I made a threat of violence. That's totally untrue. But that's what they needed to say in order to put the police on me. 4 times. One time 3 cops, the second time 3 cops, the other time 1 cop each. Then, on the 5th day, I get a phone call. James Shannon, yes, you better watch what you say. Who is this? The supervisor of the lieutenant that came to my house. I said, what do you mean I got to watch? Do you have any intentions of going to the next meeting? I said, yes, I do. He said, I don't think you're going to be able to go. I think they're in the process of trespassing you. Now, who told the police all this? That's what I want to know. That's what I'm going to find out. It's a defamation of character. It's a misuse of powers of the government.
Thank you, Mr. Shannon. No one here made any comments like that, but thank you very much for your comments. I appreciate it.
People said I was angry. I'm not angry. I'm outraged. I'm outraged.
Mr.
This
Shannon?
is America.
Mr. Shannon, I understand that. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Everybody's going to get
Would
judged.
anyone else like to speak?
In front of your God, you're going to be
Sir? Thank you very
fear
much.
death.
Would you like
Now,
to?
what would you like from me, ma'am?
Thank you very much. If you will just state your name.
You don't need anything
If
from me?
you'll just state your name and record, and name,
My name is Barry Marks,
good morning, Mr. Marks.
8050.
Thank you.
What I'm curious about is the fact that the first time we had a meeting here was 5 days. They gave us a notice, and then 5 days was a meeting, and then they were going to start work 5 days later. We've gone through a couple of meetings over this situation already. Now, over the weekend, I got another notice that these plans that were set in gold and had to be set there, and this is the way it had to be, they changed it to they're going to put it on the other side of the road. That's the notice between this morning's meeting and when the notice come out. So is it a fact that they really had made up plans? Or is this stuff that they're just moving around whenever they see fit? And another opinion I have, in order worrying about our little piece of Lagoon Road that's never had a problem, I've been there 30 years. They could just increase the size of the pipe from Estero Boulevard down Redfish to the existing outlet, and everything would be fine. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marks. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, the public comment is closed. We'll move on to local achievements and recognitions. Joanne, anything?
I just wanted to ask with regard to Aurora Offshore. Glad it didn't roar onshore. Does anybody know when it's going to be televised? I heard it's going to be televised in 2 weeks.
I saw it yesterday.
Yesterday.
Oh, it was yesterday. I missed it.
But I also
I wanted
heard that
to
it was
announce
going to
it.
be at the end of the month as well, but then yesterday I saw something, so I
Oh,
don't
I
know.
missed it. I wanted to let everybody know when to watch it
Yeah.
on TV. Okay, that's all for me.
Okay. Ray, anything?
No, just congratulate everybody involved with the Aurora Offshore. It was a great day. It was great to have great weekend, actually. And it was great to have the boats back. The races brought a lot of people out. Everybody seemed to have a good time. And look forward to it again sometime. That's it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. Bruce, anything?
Yeah, I did watch the recording of the race yesterday. They did a decent job. It was an hour show on CBS Sports, and I don't know if you can get it on demand or not, but I taped it, so I've still got it. The thing that I was anticipating was that they were going to keep saying Fort Myers instead of Fort Myers Beach. They did not say Fort Myers once. They said Fort Myers Beach. Every time they printed it up, it said Fort Myers Beach. And I was very happy to see that. They showed the block party down on San Carlos, Old San Carlos. They showed the boats coming over the bridge, so it was a nice showing of the town. So, and it was a good race. The other thing I wanted to make a comment was the hazardous waste pickup. I was very impressed by the process that those people used. That was really, really organized. And you pull in and turn around, people guiding you. They took everything out of your car for you. They didn't want you to get out of your car. And they did a really great job. But we probably ought to try to do that one time in season. Okay, that's it.
I just wanted to piggyback on that with, about the hazardous waste. I did have a lot of people comment that they hoped we will do that again, maybe in February or March or sometime during season when people are here. And I know this is kind of an odd thing to put under local achievements and recognition. It really is more recognition. I'd like to recognize all the phone calls and emails from people that I've gotten relative to the appeal made on the TPI case. So many people they're expecting us to make a statement. The town's statement is simply that we will continue to pursue in as aggressive manner as possible the lawfully made unanimous vote to approve the TPI case that was approved in May of 2018. I did meet with Mr. Herron and Mr. Hernstadt last week relative to this, and it's as simple as that. Most of the people who have called or written are asking what they can do. Having just seen Hamilton this weekend, I want to scream, rise up, but there isn't really anything to rise up to at the moment. This is a process that we have to be patient and diligent through. It's unfortunate for our community that this delay exists, but we will persevere, and just for another Hamilton quote, we won't lose our shot. So, okay, that's it on my items, and the next item is the advisory committee items and reports, and we have Mr. Veach here from Marine Resource Task Force, and we also have a a recommendation from the Public Safety Committee afterwards. Go ahead. Good morning, Bill.
Hi, Bill Veach, the record. Just thought I'd give you an update. It's been a while. So some of our agenda items. There's one new thing that I'd prefer to get a council buy-in. You know, we've been working on ways to try to get people to be more Florida-friendly with their plantings and stuff in their yard. We're kind of stalled because it's a bit cumbersome, because, you know, when you want to certify someone's yard, you need someone who knows what all the plants are and what's native, and it takes considerable skills. But I was talking to a friend in Boulder, Colorado during a visit there. They had a program they called Pollinator Neighborhoods. Pollinator Neighborhoods. And the idea is you get a group of neighbors together, you promise to not use pesticides, to plant flowers and host plants, and then we'll put signs up around the neighborhood declaring it as a pollinator-friendly neighborhood. And you know, we're also willing to advise people on plants and things. I know from my experience with a rather ambitious wife in the yard that, you know, it's really easy to fill your yard with butterflies here. And it lasts year-round. It's a beautiful thing. So I think that's a simpler way. It's a bit of a quick hitter for us. The only thing we'd really need is your approval to go forward with it and, you know, put the town logos on signs and things that we put around neighborhoods. So
That's interesting.
it's really a fascinating. I like the concept because it's not as complicated to execute, and can bring neighbors together. Because I already know plenty of neighbors who already do this, and sometimes they do it without thinking about it too much. And who doesn't like flowers and butterflies? Sorry about the throat. It could be something I could talk about on the beach, but anyway. The next thing is we were given a call to look into manatee deaths. And we've been working on this. I think the person who brought it wanted some kind of immediate response, but we're trying to figure out what we can do. Conversations with several people, it does seem like there's some difficulty in making manatee zones. The FWC has their way of doing it. I've been in contact with Save the Manatees, nonprofit group, and this you know, very knowledgeable person was telling me that, you know, you have to look at traffic, whether or not so it's boat traffic, whether or not the enforcement people can get there, the number of manatees. They recommended really two things that are not particularly exciting. One is just get people to report whenever they see incidents, and the other is signs that you can put up. And in both in marinas, and I think some of them through the FWC, maybe you could put on some pilings and things on areas. But it sounds like getting them to put in a manatee zone can be difficult, but we're kind of still investigating it. Okay, another thing, lizards.
Bill, can I just ask you a question there?
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, back when I was in high school, that Save the Manatees, actually all of that started, and I remember it well, even though that was a pretty long time ago now. I guess my question is, have you been able to identify where exactly the manatee deaths are occurring?
Well, you know, there's like 20 some odd in Lee County, and scanning the spreadsheet of where they happened, most of them seem to be on the river. Talking to Save the Manatees, they said that, you know, where they find a manatee doesn't necessarily mean where it was killed.
Sure, of course not.
And
Yeah.
sometimes they're killed from other reasons. Boat strikes are very prevalent, and you know, if you ever see manatees, like you go out to the
Yeah.
power station,
Sure.
they all have scars on them. Even the ones I think in Buccaneer Bay, there have been 4, I think, around the island, and you know, I don't know how much faith you can have that they actually got struck where they are, unless they're in a really close place where they won't wash in and out. But I've heard from Bruce saying there's a couple in Buccaneer Bay that were actually located or misidentified where they were for a location. And I think there was a couple in Big Carlos Pass.
That were dead?
Dead. That's where they were found. Yeah.
That's where they were found. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and there's a lot of reasons besides boat strikes, but boat strikes are something we can prevent. And of course, there are entities, you know, there are people who don't want more manatee speed zones. You know, there's people who are in a
Well,
hurry.
sure. Well, okay. I mean,
There's some.
I'm not one of those people.
Yeah. But there is resistance. There's always like
Sure.
interested parties who may have a different view.
Okay. Thank you. Go.
Lizards. We're asked to look into lizards. I did send out a little press release trying to figure out where, you know, if there's problem areas. And also, we looked at what Sanibel does. And Sanibel, they have professional trappers that call out in 2 cases. One is the monitor lizards, because I think they're a threat to people, and they'll send trappers out. We don't have those, I think. I haven't heard of any reported on the beach. The other is iguanas, and the iguanas, the problem is more property damage. They tend to dig. They dig around seawalls, they dig around foundations, and they cause some damage. So what Sanibel does is they'll send a professional trapper out. With some of the other lizards, they're smaller invasive lizards, the curly-tailed lizards and the red-headed agama, which is a fairly new one. You get the red-headed agama, we lose all our knolls pretty quickly, it seems. So we've been working on trapping those, but the big problem with them is not property damage or personal health. It is they just displace native creatures, and they eat pollinators. So they'll eat just about anything.
Can we go back to the iguanas for a second? So the other day, Jane Plummer had a 7-foot iguana on her deck. Yeah, 7 feet. And she has a little tiny dog, so she was wondering who would win that battle. I'm afraid to say it wouldn't be the little dog. So what does somebody do, because that iguana is somewhere, what does the next person do that sees that iguana?
Put your dog inside?
Pellet gun.
Bill.
You're allowed to kill them.
Pellet gun.
You're allowed to kill
What?
Pellet gun.
A pellet gun.
They can be trapped. And see, this is one of the things that we haven't formulated a complete plan yet, but they will come back to council and say, you can consider a couple options. And one is get professional trappers. The other is to train town staff on how to trap them. I understand that mango is a really good bait for iguanas. We've been successful at trapping some of the smaller lizards that they said were not easy to trap, some of the agama lizards and the curly-tailed lizards. That's an option.
How have you trapped those? People are listening, and I'm listening.
I have a little
Lots of
humane trap,
details.
and it's a little dual door thing. And we went through a few different things of bait, and chicken skin seems to be the most successful. So I've been eating more chicken lately. And we had, our house was overrun with them. We have a fairly small place, but there was a lot, and now there are much, much fewer, and I'm not catching very many. But that's one little property. Any kind of lizards is really, I think it's hard to get rid of them. Like iguanas swim. Most lizards seem to be pretty good swimmers. And we did have Rick Bauer come, and he does this for the county, works with lizards. He said the next big thing will be the pythons coming, because I guess they're in the Naples area,
Well, that's something to look forward to.
and they spend 90% of their time in the water. So an island is not necessarily a barrier for them. But anyway, that hasn't happened yet, so we won't worry about that. And the one thing about the iguanas is they're edible. So the tail has a lot of meat. I saw it on Man vs. Food. They cook them up in the Keys all the time.
Popular in Venezuela to eat too. They eat the eggs too.
Okay, Bill, all these very, very interesting suggestions.
Well, if they, at least around my house, if you're edible, then you're in trouble. So.
It's going to remind me not to accept another dinner invite.
Well, maybe we'll have some iguana sometime. Who knows?
Yeah, look forward to that.
We also have in front of the council the fertilizer ordinance, and I know that John's been working on that and trying to bounce it off of everyone he thinks he needs to bounce it off of, so we don't get in any kind of legal trouble. How's that going, John?
Staff is coordinating with the Department of Agriculture and the University of Florida Institute of...
That means slowly, very, very
Yeah.
slowly.
Unfortunately, there's a state requirement that says if we want to adopt anything more extensive or stricter than the model fertilizer ordinance, which is what we have in place, we have to go through an enhanced review and approval process and get the input from those two entities. We're in the process of doing so.
Madam Mayor, I think the short version is that there's a hope that we could sort of piggyback off another municipality who laid the foundation for a more restrictive ordinance, And the feedback we're getting is that we can't, we have to go through the process ourselves.
Yeah, it would be nice, you know where we are. I mean, last summer was disastrous. I was crowing about how beautiful the water looked, you know, a few weeks ago, and then red tide kicked up. So it would really be nice to do whatever we can to try to improve our water. Okay, finally, the bag program. We're starting phase 2. I have one sheet. I can give this to Michelle if you want to make copies, but I only did one print. That's our sign-up sheet. We're putting up press releases, and we're going to start selling the spots in earnest. So we need 16 spots to sell. Once we have those done and committed, then we'll work on the next phase of bags.
Great.
Okay.
Michelle, would you make us all a copy of that? Do you mind? Whenever you have a speed, you don't have to do it right this second. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else any requests you have of us?
No, just thank you for all of your hard work. We appreciate the dedication.
It's not as hard as being like a town councilor, though.
No?
Oh, I don't know. Run and find out. You can compare.
Anybody have questions for Bill? Bill, so how are you all, somebody taking the lead on selling these boxes, or how?
Right now, I'm just going to direct everything to us, to me and Steve Johnson.
You and Steve?
And
Okay.
everybody, they're, you know, like a lot of committees, MRF has 4 very active members that show up every time and are very engaged. And all 4 people are, you know, you can approach any one of them.
Great.
And they'll fill out the paperwork and get it done.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, super. Okay, next item is an approval of the, oh no, public safety, I'm sorry, let's discuss the public safety report. And we don't have anybody from public safety. Okay, so I actually watched the meeting. John Goggin runs a heck of a meeting. It was, they all had very, very good input. Roger, you're leaning in, you have something?
Well, I just,
Thank you, Michelle.
I think you have the benefit of 2 documents. One is a summary of their comments. 2 is staff's attempt to reflect those on a map of the area. It was a staff's plan to, at the next M&P session, to allow the council to absorb this information and have a detailed discussion of what elements of the now 3 or 4 plans that are out there they like or dislike, so that could be summarized and provided to the county so that they can go forward with a proposed design that FDOT will need so that they can complete their design of the San Carlos Boulevard project and how traffic dumps off the bridge into Fort Myers Beach.
So our work session is on the 29th. That's when you're anticipating us discussing this?
Well, obviously, you could discuss it now if you wish. I just thought that, you know, to give you a chance to absorb it and to do some further consideration yourselves into the different plans and variations of different elements so that the conversation be more precise.
Anybody object to that?
Well, I just want to, Madam,
Yes.
just thank the staff for this. As I was reviewing this weekend, these notes on the meeting, my thought was, boy, I'd love to see this on a map. And bingo, here it is. So thank you very much for that.
That's Chelsea.
Makes it a lot easier to...
Well, I worked on it with Chelsea, too.
Oh, well,
We
thank you.
artists got together.
Thank you both. It's very helpful.
Okay, so we will, we'll put this off until the 29th. Hopefully, Mr. Goggin will be here, and that would be
Want
great.
any just initial quick reactions
Sure.
or anything?
Go ahead,
Because maybe
Joanne.
there might be some guidance too. I had the opportunity to, since I had sketched it out as well, I talked to Roger about it, and there were a couple things. You know, I agree, we'd love to get pedestrians out of that little area there as much as possible. But I guess I'm wondering if we'll have feedback with regard to the uniform traffic manual and how many crosswalks we can actually take out of there. Will we have that in advance of our M&P so we'll kind of know where our hands are tied and not?
Well, I think you can be pretty much limited to that. These are the places we would prefer not to have crosswalks. And the traffic engineers, be they for the county and/or for FDOT, they're going to look to the manual, and if the manual says it has to be there, it has to be there. But you clearly can express your desire for it to be at place A or place B or not be there at all. And we will work to formulate those recommendations and pass them forward. But as in our conversation that we had, Counselor, at the end of the day, there are certain requirements that crosswalks have to be at certain locations, and at the end of the day, that they're going to have to be there. So I think the crosswalk situation is going to be more of a preference thing than we don't want this and we do want that.
Basically, we're going to be asking for as few crosswalks as legally allowable in that area, I guess. We may not
And
have
then you
that.
can go on and prioritize ones that we'd like this one the least, this one the next least, and so on and so forth.
That was the statement that was, my biggest concern when we think about this, because there may be a little hand tying with regard to that. But I appreciate public safety's input, and Chelsea, thank you for this.
Anybody else have any
Yeah,
quick comment?
for that meeting, can we get the routes of the trolleys that go through this area?
We can ask for that.
Okay, thank you.
I could draw that for you if we ask for it and don't get it, so that's pretty easy. I'd just like to make one comment. I think the only thing that I disagreed with, and I really do disagree with it, is having Fifth Street one way off the island. It's for a number of reasons. It just seems to me that it creates a potential. I'm just going to say I disagree with that. Let me just tell you all another thing. In speaking with Roger the other day and John the other day about Commissioner Sandelli and the DOT people, it was suggested that probably the best thing for us to do after we discuss this at the work session is to come up with something very similar to what the Public Safety Committee has done, a consensus of what we feel are the top points, and then to maybe meet with Commissioner Sandelli and one of his staff members, Roger and I, and perhaps John Herron, maybe even John Goggin, have a small meeting, and then if we need to have a broader meeting, just to sort of expedite the circle. Does anybody object to that? Okay.
Whatever expedites it, I
Great.
think would be great.
Great. Okay, so I'll let him know about that. All right, we'll move on then to the next item, which is an approval of the minutes for the joint session of the Town Council on September 5th, 2019, and the regular meeting of October 7th, 2019. Is there any discussion on that or changes? We have a motion by Joanne. I'll second it. If any discussion, no discussion, and Mr. Murphy, waiting on you. And it passes unanimously. Thank you all. The next item is the consent agenda, which is ongoing professional services and the town manager's execution of that. The lobbyist Ronald Book contract renewal, and the town council meeting schedule. If someone could please make a motion to approve the consent agenda. And there's a motion and a second, and
I just have a question.
go ahead, Ray.
What, I didn't read the contract with Ron Book. What's his fee?
It's $45,000 a year.
45,000. Okay. Has he ever been to one of the meetings? Has he ever come down here? I know he's a busy guy.
No, he hasn't, but we can ask him to please schedule that.
It'd be nice.
I think one of the things, and Mr. Vice Mayor, you're in here when we had the initial discussion about bringing on lobbyists, and in particular, Mr. Buck. if you research the most effective lobbyists over the last 20 years in Tallahassee, I think you will see many articles about.
I'm not disputing his
Yeah, so,
qualifications. I
yeah.
know him.
Okay, well, I'm
know him.
glad to hear that.
Yeah.
And since you know him, then you know, for the most part, most of his clients are corporations and big entities, big governmental entities. I too know him for 25 years.
Yeah.
And he has, due to our relationship, he has agreed to, in fact, all the places I've served as a city or town manager, has agreed to take on those entities as a client, I think partially out of our relationship. Obviously, we pay him, but I would say we make up a very, 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 very small piece of his business.
I'm sure.
But that being what it is, I will be glad to ask him on his next trip through Southwest Florida, please see if he can arrange it so that he can be here and you all can meet him on a face-to-face basis.
My only reason for asking that was because when I last served on the council, and I was on the regional planning council and on the state regional council, Ronnie was our lobbyist on that as well, and we got to meet him at the annual meeting every year. He came, and I just thought it would be interesting for the rest of the council to meet him, because as you know, he is a very interesting guy and obviously a very sharp attorney. But so maybe we can just use your.
I'll be in touch with him.
Yeah,
Did you want to
thank
say
you.
something,
I
John?
was going to say, he's doing a great job, and I just prefer he spend his time doing the great job as compared to meeting him if we have something, but just a point. If he happens to be nearby, great, but I don't want to mess up the great relationship we have.
Yeah, I think he generally makes a trip to Southwest Florida once a year. I'll ask him to put us on his calendar when he does
Thank you
that.
very much. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Murph, waiting for you to press your button there. And the motion carries unanimously with Councilmember Hassafras on an excused absence. The next item, we move into the administrative agenda. This is a budget amendment for fiscal year 2018, 2019. It's a reappropriation amendment. Are there any questions on this for the staff?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Bruce. This is the, yeah.
Yeah, it begins on page 37 in your packet.
My question is, why are we making those changes to the 2019 budget? It looks like we're adjusting various departments up and down.
Right. So we're balancing the budget by taking surpluses in Department A and moving it to Department B, so all the departments are budgeted, expenditures match their budget as the fiscal year end closes. This has been done here and other places every year. Usually what happens is, rather than do amendments as they occur throughout the year, they're reported in staff reports and other things, and then they're compiled for a one-time reconciliation at the end of the year.
I'm going to ask you to say that one more time.
Okay.
Instead of doing little bit ones here, there, and the other, it's one big reconciliation. But I guess, well, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Roger.
Well,
Right.
let me give an example. Legal, since that's the first one that has an adjustment. It says the actual is 188,000. The budget was 370. Now it's being adjusted to 250. Is that, I'm saying that right?
Yeah, actually, no, actually, the budget was 370.
Yeah.
okay? The adjustment's minus 120 for a net of 250. So just to talk about that one specifically, as you recall, when the budget was being formulated last year, you were contemplating a review of legal services. You were considering perhaps going out for an RFP. You inevitably did that, eventually did that. We did not know what the impact of doing that was going to be.
Just a second. I'm not interested in the variance. Why? What I'm saying is, based on what I thought I heard you say earlier, is the idea is you adjust the budget to the actual. Well, the adjusted budget is now 250, but the actual is 188.
No, I didn't, if I said to the actual, I didn't mean to necessarily say that.
That's what I heard.
I mean, we could have taken,
Go ahead.
we took the amount we needed from that budget to balance other areas. Obviously, there's still a surplus in that budget. For example, in the case of the legal services, even after the $120,000 adjustment downward, there's still a surplus at the end of the fiscal year of $61,830. But that's all we needed. That's why that's all we took.
Anybody else understand that? I don't get it.
We could have taken more there, and less from somewhere else. We could have taken more there and less from somewhere else theoretically, but it was just really to make sure that all the entities, wherever possible, ended with a somewhat of an unspent balance from a low of $353 to a high of $169,000.
I guess what confuses me, and you know, it's because I'm used to thinking about my businesses. Ultimately, I would want the end result to reflect what actually happened. Not, I mean, that's why this is confusing to me. In other words, why are we trying to, it looks like we're trying to adjust it back to what was budgeted as opposed to the actual.
So what I could tell you about this is
I don't
that,
know, I'm with Bruce, I don't get this.
okay, well, I can tell you that at least every year I've been here, it's been done. I'm sure it's probably been done in prior years here because I've seen this action done in pretty much every single place I've worked. But, you know, I think when I've gotten questions about this in the past, it's because there wasn't enough money in the budget and the budget was overspent. And that's why we tried to call to the council's attention that even after all these actions, the pre-adjusted surplus is still over $1 million, which means as a rule, and I want to make sure that this is the message that goes out to the public, is that the town is very thoughtful and efficient in the use of its monies. And although we have a budget, which is a plan, we still, throughout the course of the year, scrutinize every expenditure. That's done by me for items of less than $25,000. That's done by you for items above $25,000. And the net effect of all of that is that the town's financial strength, and I think I can say this, has dramatically improved over the last 3 years, and that's something we should be proud of. This is really administrative, in my opinion. I can't do it, or else I would. It has to come to council for approval. Mr. Lang is at that inevitable training class he had to take for investments that we've been trying to get somebody to, or else he would be here to explain it in more detail. But this was done at his recommendation. It was done following the actions of past councils as well as other governmental entities that he and I have worked at. And like I said, it's basically administrative. From a council standpoint, your primary concern would be if, if it got to a point where we did not have a surplus, and then that would be an indicator of an issue, a significant issue.
Okay, let's say we had the surplus, and we didn't change the budget. What's the consequences of that?
Well, the consequences are you would have departments that would be reflected in the negative, okay? And you would have departments with larger surpluses. But if you subscribe to the idea that, okay, I want to know why Public Works exceeded their budget by $30,000. It's not that we're hiding that. That's right there on the page for you to see. If you have any questions about why that occurred, we can explain that to you. If you're concerned about the fact that they overspent by $30,000, was this number 30,000?
No, I'm not concerned about it. I just don't see the point of moving the squares and circles around.
Right, because this more accurately reflects, this is what happened this year. Yep.
Well, this document rides with it, so it's not that you're not seeing who exceeded their budget and who underspent. It's all part of the record, but it's just a point of balancing all the actions for the department, so at the end of the day, none of them are in negative.
Roger, could I ask another question?
Sure, of course.
Why wouldn't this be part of our budget discussions? Wouldn't it be more useful if the council were seeing something like this as we're making final decisions on the next year's budget? I'm just looking forward. So,
Well, we look at the expenditure rate of the departments, a burn rate, when we set their proposed budget for next year. One of the things, and we've had this conversation in the past, that you do is, you don't necessarily want to give them 1,000% of what they're asking for, because they'll find a reason to spend it in some cases. So you want to give them like 90% of what they're asking for, and then have money in the budget if they exceed that, and if our attempt is to be effective and efficient with our funds. So that's the approach that we've been utilizing. And yeah, we do have some entities that exceed their budget, but again, that's really a function of scrutinizing their budget throughout the year. And if you want to emphasize this more, Madam Mayor, as you're kind of suggesting, when Mr. Lang puts out that monthly summary of the financial numbers, it's one page that has a ton of numbers on it and a couple of graphs on it. We could spend some more time on those on an M&P to get a preview of what this is going to look like at the end of the year, if that's a concern of council.
anything else?
Yeah,
Bruce?
I'll just make the one comment. I think there were 6 departments that spent more than what the budget was. And so by doing this, I'm presuming that corrected the budget estimate so that they are not overspending. Now, is that something that's
Well,
required?
it looks like they haven't overspent.
Right.
So,
Is that a requirement to do that?
no. So sometimes the over expenditure is a recurring thing. If that's true, your comment, Councilor Butcher, would be true. If the over expenditure is something that's not recurring, happened to a set of circumstances such as red tide or something like that we can't fully anticipate, then we wouldn't necessarily make that adjustment prospectively. Depends on what triggered the over expenditure. Again, we tend to, at the department level, budget fairly tightly, and then we have contingency and other monies in the budget for issues like that.
Why is code enforcement so dramatic? Code enforcement and community development both.
Well, code enforcement is because of the fact that both employees left in a year, and we had to bring in contract employees to cover till we could recruit. So we had a major expenditures in there, and community development is So, we don't know how many items are going to come into community development in any given year, or any given day for that matter. We wanted to make sure we were responding timely, so we actually brought additional help to make sure that people could get information to proceed with their projects, so that permits would go out timely. So, and then, of course, we're spending a lot of time reviewing TPI plans and still, of course, doing the day-to-day activities.
Okay. Joanne, did you have a question?
Yeah, a question and a comment. I appreciate the difficulty in being right on target with each of these departments and the things that happen throughout the year. And I agree that if it seems to benefit council to see these figures, at the time of budget, and looking forward, that would be a good thing. I do not want it to get lost, however, when you look at this budget from last year, which was no increase in millage at that time, that a fine job was done in having a surplus of over $1 million. And I don't want that point to be lost. I think that is this all part of the 6 million surplus we're at right now, which is almost 30%, I believe over 30%?
Yes, it is.
This is not an additional million.
That's
What
correct.
was in Mr. Lang's report. So if we improve this process a little bit, that would be great, but I also want to thank Mr. Lang and the town manager for being in a position where at the 0.87 last year, correct?
That's correct, ma'am.
That we had $1 million surplus. So thank you for that, and we can improve the process for council's review as we move forward. That'd be great.
Chris, do you have anything else?
Nope.
Somebody like to move this item? There's been a motion by Joanne and a seconded by Mr. Murphy. If there's no further discussion, waiting on you, Bruce.
That is
The motion-
Resolution 18-32, just to
The
clarify.
motion carries 3-1, with Mr. Butcher dissenting. The next item is Resolution 9030, which is a Division of Emergency Management Mitigation Bureau. John, I need to read the resolution title. This is a resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, authorizing the town manager or the town manager's designee to apply for and administer a grant from the Division of Emergency Management Mitigation Bureau for funds in the amount of $66,090 for Shell Mound Boulevard and Buccaneer Drive drainage, authorizing the town manager or his designee to execute related documents, providing an effective date.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, sir.
This is the beginning of a series of grants that we applied for through the State Hazard Mitigation Fund. The Hazard Mitigation Fund from the state is derived from a percentage of the hurricane damages that occurred. Those monies are set aside by the counties where the damages or the hurricane impacted. There's a local mitigation strategy. That's where all the governmental entities within that particular county meet and prioritize projects. Our staff, and as well, our stormwater staff, as well as our public works staff, work very hard to make sure that the town got its fair share of those hazard mitigation monies. Particularly, Chelsea was very leading our effort in that regard. As a result, this is the beginning of, I believe, a series of these types of grants that we will be receiving. The good news is that this will help us reduce our costs as it pertains to the town's planned projects. So these are very significant. And they're part of the $5.5 million number that I previously told council. was our grant expectation or grants received over the 3 years that I've been fortunate to be your town manager.
Okay, any questions for staff relative to Resolution 1930?
Yes.
Go ahead,
Just
Bruce.
One easy question. Why is it these particular streets? Does it matter what street it is?
We try to apply for streets that were queued up because there's a very tight timeline to get these projects done. We try to apply for streets that we knew we could meet the timeline or basically a part of the town's ongoing plan for improvements. One of the things that gets you points in the prioritization, so when we're competing against Bonita and Estero and the county itself, is readiness. And that's why we use these particular streets.
Good job. Glad you got the money.
Chair, I'll move approval of resolution number 19-30.
Okay, so there is a motion by Mr. Murphy and seconded by Joanne. The motion carries 4-0 with Ms. Hossafrost being excused. And the next item is Resolution 1931. This is a resolution of the Town Council of the Town of Fort Myers Beach, Florida, authorizing the town manager or the town manager's designee to apply for and administer a grant from the Division of Emergency Management Mitigation Bureau for funds in the amount of $44,400 for Fairview Boulevard and Crescent Street drainage. This is authorizing the town manager or his designee to execute related documents and providing an effective date. This is Resolution 1931.
Madam
Questions?
Chair, I'll move approval of that resolution 19-31.
Okay. And
Well, now.
is there any further discussion on this? Hearing none, no questions. The motion carries 4-0 with Councilmember Hossafrost excused. Next item is the Estero Boulevard Waterline Replacement Project, Phase 4. This authorizes the town manager to enter into contract for the construction of Phase 4 of the Estero Boulevard Waterline Project from Albatross to the end of the island, end of the island, with Mitchell and Stark, subject to FDEP approval. The construction cost for Phase 4, Albatross to southern end of the island, is $10,420,000, $192.58. So $10,420,192.58.
Sure it's not 59. We don't want to under budget.
It may be, it will come with a change order.
Christie, you have comments?
No,
Chris,
ma'am. This is
nothing?
the final phase for Estero Boulevard.
Bravo. Any questions for Christie?
What's left after this? Anything? We got side streets.
Well, we
right?
have side streets,
Yeah.
but we will officially be down on Estero Boulevard.
This will be Estero Boulevard complete. And what's the completion date, Christie? Do we have any idea?
It's early fall of 2021. The county's going to be, remember, at the end of 2021. We will be ahead of them, but that's the contract completion date.
When do they start?
Soon as we get the green light from the state and our consultant, I understand, has actively been securing that, and I think we even got a early start date from them, which will allow us to continue to keep the contractors' crews working without a break.
Let's make that a special point of that. You said the fall of 2021.
That's contractually. They've been doing better and
Time-wise.
time-wise. And of course, you have our firm commitment that we will be, ahead of the county and out of their way so that we don't hold them up, as we have been in every phase thus far.
Dave, I have to tell you, your team with Mitchell and Stark, the guys that are out there, have just been doing a really great job, and especially that public zone. I know that had to have been terribly difficult for them, but they really have been doing a very good job. So thank you for that, Dave. Dave's with Mitchell and Stark. Okay, so if we have no other questions, if someone would like to move this item, there is a motion by Mr. Butcher and seconded by Ms. Shamp, and the motion carries unanimously with Councilmember Hossafras absent and excused. Thank you very much, everyone, on that. Next item is the SRF Technical Services. This is the water loan amendment. This authorizes the town manager to execute a contract not to exceed $150,720 with Angie Brewer and Associates to perform compliance activities, loan application agreements, and loan administration required by the State Revolving Loan Fund. Criteria for the Estero Boulevard Phase 4 Amendment 10.
Madam Chair, I'll move approval of the SRF Technical Services Water Loan Amendment Number 10.
There is a motion for that and a seconded by Ms. Shamp. Is there any further discussion or any questions on this? This has been done routinely, and thank you all very much for your help on this. The motion carries unanimously with Councilmember Hossafras excused.
Madam Mayor, just a quick comment. When I was mentioning a moment ago how critical it is that we keep the contractors' crews moving and engaged, I just want to mention that we would have not been able to do that without their help. And that's critical not only in us meeting and staying ahead of the county, but as I said, Project Momentum is a very, very important thing. And the team from Angie Brewer is doing a great job.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for that. Next item on the agenda is the 2019-2020 TDC funding agreements. This is to accept and authorize the execution of the 2019-2020 agreements for tourist development tax funding for the following projects: beach and shoreline maintenance, beach erosion monitoring, and Newton Park restroom renovation. Does anybody have any questions for staff on this? If not, may I have a motion, please? So we have a motion by Mr. Murphy and a seconded by Ms. Shamp. Any further discussion?
Madam Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I just want to point out that a shout out to the TDC for recognizing the cost of trying to do things right at Newton Beach Park and amending their budgets accordingly to allow this project to go forward. So
Yes,
thank them very much.
They did make a point of saying that that this was an exception. They don't like to make those amendments, but that is great. And Allison's been doing a wonderful job, and Chelsea also following up on that. So, Bruce, just waiting on you. We have a motion by Mr. Murphy, seconded by Ms. Shamp, and the motion carries unanimously with Councilmember Hossafras excused. The next item is final public comment. Is there anyone who would wish to make Mr. Scott? You had a light on your pocket, but it's your sunglasses.
Glasses.
Good morning, Ed.
You wouldn't let me in here if I had a knife.
No, a
Oh,
light.
a light.
Oh, not a knife, a light.
Look in my eyes and you'll see a light. My name is Ed Scott and I live at 412 Harbor Court. I just would like to take exception to a comment by somebody on the council that said no one was here from the safety committee.
Oh,
I am a member of the safety committee, and I would make a comment any damn time you'd like, okay?
And you did
Thank you.
You did a really good job at the meeting, too, and I apologize, Ed. That's right, you are. Did you want to say anything about your work, or you just want to correct me? All right, thank you, Ed.
Job well done.
It was a great meeting. It was a really good meeting. Anybody else care to make any comments or correct me on anything? Anyone? Okay. That's public comment is closed. The next thing is town manager items. Roger?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I have some good news to share with you. That is that the town received its local agency certification, LAP program certification, so that we can proceed with the signal at Old San Carlos and Estero. So Right now, we're in the project-specific category, but I'm sure if we have future lap work, we will eventually perhaps be able to get it just blanket for any project, but right now it's per project. But it's still a significant accomplishment, and I'm very pleased of our team of going through that process and getting completed on time.
Name who was on that team?
So we
we can
had,
recognize
yes,
them?
so it's a representative from Public Works, who was Chelsea, it was a representative from Community Development, who was Jason Green, and our financial team, Mr. Lang.
Thank you to all.
The next item I wanted to bring to your attention, and perhaps, I don't know if you want to schedule this for an M&P or give me some comments now, is, we're beginning to go forward with the design of the sidewalks on Crescent, First, Second, Third, Fifth Streets. And as you might suspect, along those streets, we have, basically every property has an engineer who is telling us how they would like the sidewalk to be in front of their property. So we're getting comments from, we don't want it, put it on the other side of the street, to, why does it have to be on both sides of the street? Can you make it so I could drive into my property rather than have a raised curb, and so on and so forth. These are typical issues of putting sidewalks in sort of after the fact rather than as part of the initial development process. Right now, we're proceeding with the, under the premise that we will have sidewalks on both sides of the street, that we will have continuity of sidewalks, meaning we won't have breaks because a particular property owner doesn't want them, and that if a property owner wants any special features, we'll try to incorporate those, but those would be at the property owner's expense. So I don't know if you want to have further discussion about that at a later date or today, but that's the three premises that we're proceeding on. And last but not least, that we do have the 60% design plans available. You all are welcome to review those at your convenience if you wish to, and the public is welcome to review those if they so desire.
Thank you.
And then I'll try to answer some of the questions that came up in public comment. So those of you who have been following this project know that the stormwater project on Estero and the side streets know that the piping that we're going in support of Estero is primarily going in on the dry streets. It's not going on the streets that have historical flooding problems, because that would just be compounding the problem. The parameter that the county is working on is trying to keep the outfall pipes to a certain size, because if they exceed that size, that requires ongoing monitoring in perpetuity, which becomes a very, very expensive proposition. So therefore, they're trying to size the outfall pipes at a certain maximum so that they don't trigger that monitoring. For those of you who have personally experienced the project or have seen, we received an email just, I think, last night or over the weekend from somebody, that once the project is done, the overall response that we're getting from the residents on the street is that they're happy with the job the town is doing. We're trying to be respectful of everyone's landscaping. We're doing everything we can to minimize the impacts of people. Again, we're working in the right-of-way. We're not working on their property unless we have a easement or an agreement with them to be in their property. Otherwise, we keep our work to the right-of-way.
Roger, in the case of Lagoon, the section of Lagoon Road that the residents were here about today, is that all right-of-way, or are there easements involved there?
It is all right-of-way. The transmission lines are set up so for storage and carrying capacity. So that's why that comment was made that even if there's no drains needed on that particular street, why the pipe needs to be there anyway. So I think that kind of addresses that point. And I guess the last point I'll try to address is that the design plans are predicated on what's known to be underground, okay? But however, when you deal with a place like Fort Myers Beach, where what's underground has not been well documented over the years, once the project begins, there are innumerable conflicts, unfortunately, that are discovered. And as a result of those conflicts, and just like in Escape of Landscaping, if we could go around it, we have to go around it. And in the case of some streets, I think it was by Councilor Butcher's house, it was found that we had to relocate the pipe to the other side of the street just because where it was originally planned to go in, there were too many conflicts to proceed with the pipe. So we all, wish that everyone knew about where the utilities were underground, but unfortunately, I guess perhaps to the way development occurred here on Fort Myers Beach, that all of those things would have not been well documented over the years. And pretty much every street has a surprise, but in the case of Laguna Shores, there was a big surprise. And
So when Mr. Marks, the gentleman who spoke last from the Laguna Shores people that were here this morning, he specifically asked whether or not the plans had changed from one side of the street to the other. Have they?
on certain streets, yes.
Well, they don't care about certain streets. They care about their segment of the street. That's what the question was.
I don't know if it's on his street, but I know on other streets it did. I could check on his particular street, but I don't know about that, but I do know that in some streets it has relocated to the other side. I could check on that particular street, but the point is that we, to a certain extent, we can go below or above conflicts, but when they're just so innumerable, this is basically a gravity system. If we can't do that and maintain the gravity flow from Estero, then we have to go to an area within the right-of-way where there is room to do that. We don't have a pumping system as part of this. I think you all are well aware of that. We're not pumping the water out to the bay, where it's flowing via gravity.
So let's address Mr. Gunther's question. He was the first gentleman to speak. And his question, his primary concern appeared to be the environmental impact about discharging water into, did he call it Redfish Lagoon? Buccaneer Bay, into Buccaneer Bay. So could you address that, Roger?
Right. So council is well aware of one of the longest lead time items in this entire project is permitting. And that is because we need permits from the State Department of Environmental Protection. We need permits from the Army Corps of Engineers. We need permits from the Health Department. And all of those entities are giving us permits because one of the primary aspects of this overall project is water quality. And rather than to have raw water running into the bay, to have it go through a treatment system, and that treatment system can be as simple as a filter on an inlet to something more complicated. But the idea is to try to not have the water run directly from sort of the road into the bay.
Which is what it currently does.
So now, everybody here is concerned about the quality of our nearshore waters. It's a primary concern to everybody. And I think that one of the reasons why the state required stormwater activities, other than just draining the street, is because they believe that these systems help improve the nearshore water quality. And that's why the town is spending millions of dollars to do that, this project.
Okay, and his issue, the other issue that he raised was relative to public meetings, and the public meetings were, aside from the neighborhood meeting that was held on the 24th, the public meetings all occurred during the planning phases of the stormwater project.
Well, Madam Mayor and Council Butcher and Council Champ, I think you're well aware of how many public meetings there have been on this project, starting from the approval of the master plan and continuing through today. And there's been a recurring issue throughout the life of the project, and that is that because the town works so minimally in the right-of-way, people have taken the right-of-way to be their property. If this were, I want to say, a typical city, all the roads would be double wide, probably double the width that they are, at least 1.5 times that width. There would be sidewalks on all of those streets, and the private property line where it meets the right-of-way would be more clearly delineated, and people would be more understanding of where that line is and where their public property begins versus where their private property begins. Because the town has had a property owner, or a lot of respect for property owners, not to encroach into right-of-way other than where is absolutely necessary. And people have had the benefit of having the full and free enjoyment of the use of their right-of-ways for many years. But that doesn't change the fact that those right-of-ways still exist for public purposes. We continue to make every effort to try to avoid removing, whether it's landscaping or decorative mailboxes or anything else, to the greatest extent possible, and keep our project within the asphalt part of the right-of-way. But that's not always possible. And when we have to go into right-of-way, I think we do a very careful job of restoring it. I think we did some work on your street, Madam Mayor, and I think you had a chance to see that firsthand. I hope you've seen some of the emails from other constituents who we've done work in.
I think Hercules was a better example of, there were several residents who had major issues that we were able to work around, which brings me to Mr. Shannon, who I don't know him, but he appears to be mostly concerned with the value of his property locked in with landscaping. So I don't know what his landscaping looks like, but I'm guessing that he feels that it's going to be threatened by this project. Do you know any specifics on that? And whether or not the drainage pipes are going in tomorrow, is that was another issue?
Well, based on the action taken at the last council meeting, nothing's been stopped or delayed. So the contractor is continuing to work in the neighborhood. I don't know that, I haven't talked to Mr. Flickinger this morning, so I don't know where they're working yet this week. I normally would talk to him on a Monday when we don't have a council meeting and go over where we're working this week. But I could find out the answer to that. But at the end of the day, I think for those of you who did the Hercules walk, and we did the same walk on several other streets, we tagged the trees that are in the right-of-way. And that doesn't necessarily mean that a tree or a bush or whatever is going to be impacted. It means that it's within the right-of-way.
So when will they know what's going to be impacted?
Well, based on the situation we're finding Laguna Shores, I don't know that we really know till we start digging, because we thought we were going to be working on one side of the street and wound up on the other side. So
could Mr. Shannon's conflict be over?
potentially it could be. I don't know that it is or it isn't. I mean, he's still going to have construction on his street, and again, at the end of the day, I don't believe we have a inlet plan for his property, so I don't see that he would have any larger impact than anybody else who's along the project route would have been facing. And we will do everything we can to avoid any valuable landscaping he or anybody else has. We had a case where someone had 2 palm trees, and we brought out our arborists. We we did some underground excavation to try to figure out what we could do, and we managed to skirt those trees. So we're going to try our very, very best. And I think we've shown that we've done that throughout the project to date, and we will continue to do that.
Leaning in, Bruce?
I'll just make a couple comments. Today, they're working on South Lagoon Road, if you want to call it that. They're calling theirs North Lagoon Road. I live on South Lagoon Road. It was on the other side, it was presented to be on the other side of the street from my property. It's now in front of my house. When I left this morning, they were digging down to China.
So the pipe is on your side of the
Yeah.
street, okay?
And it's
Oh, yeah, I know.
Oh, yeah.
that
they're
big.
big.
We know.
So, and it's, you know, the guys are super. They're doing a great job. They're very mindful. My mailbox got hit by a truck, and then it got broken in half, and they're fixing it. And anyhow, they're doing a good job, and it's way to go. I think on North Lagoon, I think that they are, last I heard when talking with Wayne and Company, I think they are moving it to the other side of the street from Mr. Shannon. Of course, the other side of the street is where Gunther lives.
Mr. Gunther lives?
Yeah.
Okay.
He lives across the street from them.
But Mr. Gunther's concern didn't seem to be the same as Mr. Shannon's concern. His concern was questioning about the meetings and the whole environmental impact, which, you know, I think people forget that though it's a stormwater project, its primary function is a water quality project. Yeah.
Right. But in defense of the people on Lagoon, the big concern, I think, was, or one of the concerns was the fact we had the meeting, and then basically the next day, the construction started. There wasn't much lead time of understanding what the project was going to be, and then it happening. I mean, it was just bang, that fast. And it did happen that fast. But it didn't happen that fast on North Lagoon. It was in South Lagoon that the construction started almost immediately.
But they felt instantly threatened.
Yeah. And I think today the project emphasis is the outfalls. They're trying to get the outfalls in position for Estero Boulevard, and North Lagoon follows that outfall plan, I think, because it's not really instrumental to the outfall itself like Redfish is and Lagoon is.
So
South Lagoon.
can we
and
get an
Tarpon.
update on this to find out exactly where it's going, if we know yet, to ease some of this anxiety?
Yes.
Thank you.
One last point I want to make. We had said that we would not start the work on the streets where these folks were till the end of the month. The meetings were, I want to say, just at the end of September or maybe the 1st.
24th.
Yeah, so we had said that we would not begin the work because we want to give them time to do their survey of their neighbors, present it to council, give council time to contemplate the results of that, see if council want to give us any further instructions and all of that. So I don't want anyone to leave with the impression that, we got the green, as soon as we got the green light, we went in there the next day and started tearing it up. That's not the case. We said we
No,
would.
but
hold-
I understand how they feel. I mean, I totally understand their frustration. And it probably started with their impression that the petition meant we would change our course. And that's not what it meant, but neither here nor there.
Well, I think that-
I would just like to help that, contrary to what Mr. Shannon thinks. We absolutely do consider the residents in every single action we take. We are their servants. And I would just like to be able to give them some assurance that every effort is being made to mitigate the impacts to them. So that doesn't really
Well,
comment.
Madam Mayor and members of the council, I believe that the staff is going above and beyond the call of duty
I
to
think
try to accommodate
In every
the property
situation they
owners
have,
as best they
These people
can.
just don't know it. These people just don't know it yet because they haven't had to deal with it. but hopefully they will, and they'll have the same experience that Hercules and everybody else has had.
Yes, and at the end of the day, no one likes the disruption, for 6 months or so, but the answer is that at the end, at least the emails that I've gotten have been very positive.
From the time that we approved this project, and Anita, you were on the council, Bruce, you joined in a little bit afterwards, there have been other councilors come and gone throughout, but we have had so many meetings and really insisted with both the county and the town that streets that we're going to have a project would have meetings at each, and we have walked property to property and spoken to each person about each individual tree, each individual shrub. I mean, we really have tried our very best to be accounting or accountable to the residents and the quality of life in their neighborhoods. And in the long run, the biggest thing will be improving the flooding issue, which is so clearly improved on the sections that are complete, and water quality overall, which is the biggest impact. So I know, I lived through it, I helped fight for the residents with this. We really have bent over backwards, property by property, to do this well. Doesn't mean you have to like it. They dug up and took the right of way in front of my house, and it still doesn't feel good, even when I know it belongs to the county and doesn't belong to me. When I've been enjoying it for a lot of years, it's still, you don't like it. But we're all better off in the long run. So thank you for everybody for understanding and moving forward.
Anything else, Roger?
That's it, ma'am.
John Herron, anything?
Just very quickly to dovetail into your comments earlier, Madam Mayor, we are in communications with representatives from TPI, their legal team, in coordinating our efforts and promptly and swiftly responding to the appeal. We've received an order setting forth the deadline, so we will coordinate those efforts with TPI's counsel, keep you posted. We have also continue at the staff level at legal, and then the implementation of the settlement agreement with Mr. Prasad on the property or the litigation, finally known as the Junkanoo litigation. We have provided to Mr. Prasad, as of Friday afternoon, a list of items which is deficiencies in his building permit application, which is one of the benchmarks for the settlement agreement, and so we will continue to follow up on that and, again, keep you all posted.
Any questions on any of that?
Are there a lot of deficiencies, John?
Page and a half worth of staff comments.
Just to be clear, there are two types. One of the things where they've submitted it and they have comments that are correctable. And then I'm going to say it's like 12 and 12. 12 items that 12 comments that they need to correct, and 12 items that they still haven't submitted, plus or minus.
How are we proceeding? I mean, NBC even did a thing, unfortunately, about people sleeping in those structures. How are we proceeding in getting that closed up? What's the timeline on that? We've had a lot of resident complaints about security in that area.
Yeah, we are working on that as well. I don't want to say if it's the proper way to characterize the irony, but the sooner that Mr. Prasad submits the required documentations for his building permit, then the quicker the building permit and the structure enclosure issue will merge, and it becomes technically a construction site which has to be properly secured under the Florida Building Code. So it's kind of chicken before the egg, but we're working on both. That's the short answer.
Well, they did throw up some plywood in the front, I saw that. Tried closing it a little bit, but...
Yeah, they posted the no trespassing signs, and they sort of closed the access to the residential unit part of it, but I don't know if they fully enclosed the property.
But we're working on it.
Okay,
That's all I have.
thank you. Council member, John, I was going to ask you, I asked you the other day, did you have one of the many, the repeated questions to me is, what have the lawsuits associated with TPI cost the taxpayers? Do we have a number on that yet?
No, and I apologize, Madam Mayor. You know, the
That was
majority
good
of,
enough.
the majority of funds incurred by the town predate my tenure as your town attorney, so I can tell you from my firm's standpoint, it's relatively small, but I will get that number to all of you. And also keep in mind that at some point, about halfway through that litigation, the property owners then, no, I take that back, I'm mixing. I'll get the number.
Thank you, because
Yes.
it's a constant question.
Correct.
It's a constant question. And I think people deserve to know. Okay, anything else for Mr. Herron? Joanne?
Yeah, I had it under my items, but it's actually a question for him. I saw the video and have had some emails with regard to the jet ski rental company and boat rentals, I think, too, that does not have a town permit for jet ski rental, and apparently doesn't have a Lee County business license either, and they're delivering jet skis to the island, to your property as a rental, and I know we don't allow that in the Back Bay anyway, but
Essentially
what's
a mobile
proceeding?
vendor. We don't
They're
allow
mobile,
mobile vendors.
yeah, mobile
Yeah,
vendors.
we
So
are-
what's transpiring with that?
I have spoken with code enforcement staff and indicated to them that it's my understanding and reading of the code that that's not a permitted activity, and they should and can and should issue an enforcement.
Well, can we send a letter to the business and tell them that they need to cease and desist? We don't permit this type of activity, instead of waiting for code enforcement to cite them? I mean, it may be financially viable for them to take the fines. That's what worries me.
Well, I don't think that would be the case, but we
never
are
know.
working with Lee County to try to notify that individual that there's a whole process for them to follow with licensing with Lee County, down to us to, to where they can do that type of activity. But if you want us to send them a letter, we'd be happy to do that. We'll get it out today.
I'd like a letter to go out. Would anybody else?
I agree, if
put them on
legal,
notice.
if legal counsel thinks that's the way to proceed, I agree, but I'm not an attorney, so.
Well, neither am
We'll-
I. I don't
we'll work
play
on it.
one on TV either,
Okay.
but it seems to me that we should tell them, as, you should stop. We don't allow this. Then if they continue, they get fined and whatever.
Yeah, I think the message really is that, if people see that activity going on in the meantime, please let us know timely so we could react to it, because obviously telling us what happened yesterday is not something we can necessarily do something about. In the meantime, we will get a letter out to them today, making sure that they're aware that that's prohibited on Fort Myers Beach.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anything else, Joanne?
Not for the attorney, but in general
Anybody else have
items.
anything for Mr. Herron? Okay, go ahead with your council member. Oh, you go ahead, Bruce.
Complaints that lead into a code violation, are these complaints today, are they anonymous? Do people have to sign them before we go investigate? How does that work legally?
I would actually defer to the town manager, but it's my understanding is that we receive a complaint, we investigate it, and if there's a violation, notice of violation is issued, and the case progresses from that point
But
forward.
can you legally say that if you're going to make a complaint, you must identify yourself?
I mean, from a policy standpoint, yes, you can. There is no requirement, one way or the other, specifying how a code enforcement complaint can be filed. There's no legal requirement that it be in your name or anonymous or any other way. I do know communities that have taken the position that they won't investigate a code complaint unless a name and is associated with the complaint, and I know other jurisdictions that will take anonymous complaints.
Just to follow up on that, right now our policy is we take them whether they're anonymous or not. So, but that's something the council could change. Typically, if you were to go to the policy of not having, or for staff not to accept anonymous complaints, if someone called and they said, I want to report overgrown lot, and we said, but I don't want to give my name, and we say, well, we have a policy that you we can't accept anonymous complaints, and then they say, well, what can you do? Then we would say, well, then you have to reach out to a member of council to forward that complaint on your behalf. And that's how that complaint would get processed if one of you felt it was serious enough to forward it to us for action. So just so you understand the full circle of how, what would happen if you decided to move in the direction of non-anonymous complaints. Not to allow anonymous complaints.
Take a quick 5-minute break before we go into council members' items. Do you mind? Just quick 5. Thank you. everyone, we'll reconvene here. It is 10:49. Council members' items and reports. Joanne, you are going to begin.
Sure, just one item, an email with regard to the olfactory impacts of the dumpsters behind Town Hall in the white fenced area. Apparently the neighbors, and I'm sure
Factory impacts.
the neighbors are complaining about the smell from the dumpsters there. I'm wondering, you don't have to answer much, but, you know, can you attend to that?
Yes, so I don't believe it's our, Council, I don't believe it's our day-to-day dumpsters. I think it's, unfortunately, when we have a fish kill, and we have to put those, we have to bring dumpsters in for that, or removal of seaweed from red tide. I think that seems to be when the complaints are generated. We try to rotate the dumpsters frequently, but it's, you know, I mean, it's just a challenge for us when we have the fish kills and the red tide to expedite this stuff off the beach, but we have to store it somewhere so we can get it out of here.
Right, are they empty, they can't be emptied daily then on the fish kill situation?
Well, we try to do that, but it's also a factor of just getting the dumpster companies out here to deliver the dumpsters. Sometimes they just can't get here every day.
Whatever we can do.
We are sensitive to the issue.
Okay. That's it for me.
Mr. Murphy?
A couple of items, most of them have been answered here already. I had Lagoon on my list of questions. I think we beat that up pretty good today, and most of the questions were answered. There obviously was concern. I spoke with a couple of the residents down there, and but I think most of theirs and my questions were answered already, so I won't belabor that. I also, Madam Chair, had the same item down here, the dollars for the lawsuit with TPI. I get questions about that constantly, and so I would say, and not only what we spent on the initial lawsuit, but they want to know what we're anticipating spending on the appeal, which I'm sure is a hard one to estimate, but I'm sure we could come up with some sort of ballpark on that one. And as far as the what we have spent to date, I presume we could just get that from our accounts payable department. We don't have to go through an audit of the law firm, I wouldn't think. But anyhow, those that was that, and as far as that goes, you know, I don't know what's to be accomplished by that except to let people know, and where they take that and how they use that is I guess their own business. But then there's also the question they ask, well, how much do you think TPI has expended on their end? And of course, my answer to that was, that's none of our business. You know, that's not the town, that's TPI, and what they spend is their business. And frankly, while I'm interested in everything that goes on, I'm not too interested in their financials. And the last item I have here on my list was code enforcement. That suggestion a little while ago of us of taking calls and representing people that want to remain anonymous. I'll just go on the record right now as saying that I have no interest or intention whatsoever of becoming a code enforcement agent or an agent of code enforcement here on Fort Myers Beach. I will tell you that that's not that's not what I signed up for, and I don't want to get involved in something like that. While we're on the question of code enforcement, I continue to get constant calls about code enforcement on Fort Myers Beach. Most of it regarding the heavy hand of the town with people in these code enforcement cases. So, and I don't want to get into a debate right now about the merits of it or not, but I'm just going to go on record as saying that I am getting calls about it constantly, and I just want the people to know that it has been acknowledged. That's all. Thank you.
Bruce?
I'm I'm going to do a little presentation in just a second, but first I wanted to give a comment about the observer that gets delivered to the homes. At the last meeting, I think I made some complaints about it, that my request to have them not delivered wasn't being heeded. Since then, they got in contact with me, and I then again with them, sent them another list, and we have red dots on mailboxes now, and we don't have newspapers piling up. So the good news is, if at first you don't succeed with them, try it again, but they do respond, and they will stop delivering the papers to houses that are
Thank you
vacant.
on that, Jordan, because I know you said you were going to follow up with that, and you did. Thank you very
did.
much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
And could you explain about the red dots during the whole conversation that we had about the newspaper boxes and everything? We talked about that, whether we would have, something on the post box that holds a newspaper or whatever. But apparently you came up with a system, and it would seem like everybody in town should know what that
Right.
system is.
It's the
Because
observer.
it's not only your street. I
Right,
have
it's the
complaints on it.
observer system that if you call them and tell them you don't want a delivery permanently, or you just want a seasonal delivery, they will respond and put a red dot on your mailbox, and it won't be delivered. If you had the little newspaper box like they have in some places, if no one lives in the house, that's gonna overflow soon.
Oh, I'm not
So-
saying that's a better
Right.
system. I just want people to know.
Yeah.
Because I have other streets with the same complaint, and so they can, that street can call the observer, and they do have a system in place. That's the point. Very
Yes.
good, thank you.
Red dot on the mailbox, that sounds like Passover.
Or the scarlet letter, I don't know which. Go ahead.
Let's see. All right, I'll do my little presentation. The first sheet from the county. But I don't have to stand up there and do that.
Other way?
Read that, Gary?
She'll focus in a second.
I called up the property appraiser a while back and asked him for some information about how the taxes were sorted out on Fort Myers Beach. And I started giving him this long explanation of what I wanted, and she said, hey, stop right there. She said, go to this place on the website, bang, bang, bang. It's going to answer all your questions. And sure enough, they were right. It did. So this is page one of the matrix of how property taxes are paid by various segments on Fort Myers Beach. Okay, throw up page two. And this is the second page, so there's, page and 3/4 of listed items. And at the bottom, it gives you the total. So there's 9,632 units of property in Fort Myers Beach. So, a condo may have 100 units, and I think 100 units would be represented as a parcel. The land value is $1.3 million, the building value, sorry, $1.3 billion. The building values are $2.8 billion. The just value is $4.09 billion. The assessed value is just slightly below that. And then the taxable value is $3.5 billion. So there's like a 15% reduction in taxable value versus just value due to homesteading and those other exclusions that are available. Okay, now the third sheet, please.
Just a quick comment. You remember during our first term when we went over $1 billion? Sorry, Bruce.
All right. No, what happened? Okay. I think turn it 90 degrees to the left.
Other left. There you go.
Screen's left. Okay, we'll start there. All right, so I did a little summary didn't feel like trying to remember how to use spreadsheets again, so you have to read my scratch. So at the top, it says it's the 2019 real property town, Fort Myers Beach. That's from the government. The homesteaded parcels, there's 889 single-family residences and 982 condos that are homesteaded. So that's a total of 1871. And if you could assume there's 2 at the maximum, maybe less than 2, who knows. So the maximum voters are probably in homesteaded properties, 3,742 voters, which I thought was interesting because I think we have like 5,500 voters, something like that. Does that sound right? So, is it 5,000? Okay, so 1,300 or so voters are not homesteaded, so they're either renting or they've chosen not to homestead. They're renting their property when you can't homestead and rent, so whatever. So, or maybe they just don't know how to homestead. So then I break it down into single-family residents and then condos that are homesteaded and non-homesteaded. So the interesting thing, if you drop down to where it says homesteaded SFR, homesteaded single-family residence, their taxable amount is 63% of the just value. So they get a 37%, over time, this is accrued, they get a 37% reduction in their tax base by being homesteaded. If you go down to the condos, and then drop down one more line, is a homesteaded condos, I've circled that, it's 68%, so it's similar in value. If you go down to the subtotal, there you go, that's single-family residence and condos, subtotal, you go over there to the cross where it says just value, it's $3,235 million. 39% of that value is single-family residence. This is not homesteaded, this is all in. And 61% are condos, which I found interesting, that the value of the condos are worth more from a tax just value basis on the beach than houses. It's 50% more, 40 to 60. So then you go down to the total, and that's the sum from the second page that came from the appraiser's office. This is the all-in values that I read earlier, the $4 billion. So if you compare the single-family residence and condos all in the subtotal line to the total, you'll find that the residents, I'm calling condos and houses, equals 80% of the parcels, 59% of the land value, 88% of the building value is in condos and houses, and 79% of the just value and 82% of the taxable value. So using the old 80-20 rule, these groups are 80% of everything. So it's not 20% of the properties equals 80% of the value, but this category of houses and condos is virtually 80% across the board. So that means the commercial, our commercial portion is 20% roughly of the just value, which I thought was interesting. Then there was one more category, it's called multifamily less than 10, which I suppose are small apartments, I guess, and duplexes. And you can see that activity going across. So
It might not just be condos and duplexes. Like my property has a house and a guest house, and it's multifamily residential zoning. So on my taxes, like my home, I just make a point, it's not really like a duplex or triplex, but some of these properties you'll see along the beachfront might be in that
Alderette's
category.
old house, for
But
example.
Might be, I don't know.
but none of those are homesteaded. So if yours is homesteaded, for
Yeah.
example, it's not showing up on here.
Okay, then maybe
Yeah. So when you get down to the bottom, the total homesteaded of the condos and houses at the bottom, there's 1,871, as I said earlier. There's $309 million, which represents 24% of the land value, 572 million of the building value, which is 20% of all building values, is owned by the homesteaded people. The just value is 21%. And then if you take the just value times the homesteaded rate, it equals to $572 million. So the taxable value of homesteaded property is 16% of the grand total. So of all the property on the beach, the people that homestead own 16%, are paying taxes on 16% of the total property on the beach, which, you know, that's not new news. People were talking about that a few years ago. It was around a 15% rate. So, but it's just interesting. And of course, these people are all qualified to vote. And they represent at least, most likely, 3,700 voters in a round number. So it's just fun with facts and numbers and figures. So
Very interesting.
I wonder how that compares over time. The number of registered voters overall has stayed reasonably stable, hasn't it? It fluctuates up and down.
Gone down a little bit, I think. At one point, I thought it was over 5,000, and now it's well over 5,000. And I think in this last election, the total registered voters was about 4,700, if I'm not mistaken.
You know,
46,
Bruce,
47.
something interesting, I'm trying to remember what property specific, it might have been 391 Palermo. Some of the newer homes that are being built do not change on the property appraiser's website very quickly. So let's just talk about the three houses at the top of my neighborhood, that Jefferson, where was, you know, the tiny little shack, the little historic cottage, and the home, and there's now three 5,000 square foot homes. So the actual value of those parcels and those homes, it'd be interesting to see how they've changed on LIPA, or if they have, because I'm just trying to remember who it was, and I think it was Summer. Several years ago, there were a few different properties that someone, and I think it was her, maybe I was wrong, maybe it was Roxanne, I don't remember, but somebody had pointed out that, or raised the question, how long does it take for the property appraiser to update their records to reflect that it's no longer a $70,000 home on this lot, it's now a $5.5 million home on this lot? And I guess there was quite a lag time, quite a delay, so this may not even be accurate right now.
So, Madam Mayor,
Yes.
with respect to that point that you're making, the tax roll is based upon who's had a final building inspection and certificate of occupancy as of December 31st, 2018. That becomes the roll that's used in 2019. So basically, that's the lag time, if you will.
So it's a year.
So it's whatever's in by that December, that becomes the roll for the following year.
let me just point out a couple other fun facts here. So if you look at single-family homes and you go over to just value, it's the average single-family home just value is $594,000. And it's mostly in the land. The land is $368,000. The building is $225,000. In the homesteaded, it's very similar. It's $588,000 versus $594,000, so there's not much difference there. Condos are significantly below the single-family houses. They're running $345,000 for non-homesteaded and $374,000 just value for homesteaded condos. So that's more than $200,000 less than single-family homes. The thing I'm really confused about, Roger, and maybe you know this, is that the condos showed so little land value versus houses. So obviously you can get a lot more units in a piece of land, but a lot of these condos are on the beach and are pretty significant in value. So
Yeah, I don't know how the property appraisers treats those as common elements that everyone owns, you know, percentage share. So if there's 100 units, everyone owns, you know, one with hundredths of the value. I don't know exactly how they calculate that.
Show and tell.
And
I like it.
I have to tell you, you know, it depends on where you are on the island, but there's no doubt that an old historic beachfront house like mine, that house is probably worth $30,000 to a developer, because they're going to come in, pay the whole price for the land, rip the house down, and almost 100% of the value is in the land, depending upon where you are. So you can't, there's no blanket statements, and they're not going to come in and tear down a condo.
Wait, I don't even know if it depends on where you are, because let's just take both of our houses, for example. My house is an old house too, and it's on an oversized lot, and so mine would likely get ripped down too, because there's enough space to build something, you know, enormous. Yeah.
Make a profit.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else, Bruce?
I just point out, on the condos, I did make a mistake in the subtotal there, but the total land value of the condos as represented by the county is $1 million. Only $1 million. Now, as we say, that value may somehow got incorporated into the building value, but it just seemed odd to me that it was only $1 million worth of land value for the condos.
Yeah, just even if you don't count Bay Beach, just count the beachfront condos. It doesn't, it's not possible.
So since you're all studying this, I will tell you that there's a huge difference in these numbers. If you look at a county that has an appointed appraiser versus an elected appraiser.
Another fun fact.
Well,
So why do you think that is? In which way is it?
objectivity, probably.
Well,
the
I
numbers
think,
are higher.
you know, notwithstanding the professionalism of both, I think that an elected appraiser is under additional pressure that an appointed appraiser may not be under, of having to get reelected or get elected.
Okay, anything else, Bruce?
Madam Mayor, while there's a opportunity here, I was mentioning the names of the people who got lab certified, part of our team. I didn't mention Amy Baker's name, so I just want to make sure that you're all aware that Amy was also part of our team.
Bob, Amy?
So what's the process now to get the light? Is it a 2-year process?
So
6-month process?
so basically the way the state has it funded is they have the design funded starting July, if my memory serves me correctly, and then construction money is in the following July.
Oh, 2 years away.
Right, we can see about how we might be able to expedite, but I think generally with the slot funding, you can't start till the funding cycle.
Anything else, Bruce? Okay, I have a few things. I'm gonna start with the weird Craigslist ad, and the anonymous emails that we're getting. You know, whenever there's an anonymous email, especially ones relative to a certain area, I'm just filing them in a file, because I'm not gonna answer an anonymous email. And not only that, but we're getting a lot of emails that really, like a lot of public records requests, kinds of things that don't pertain to council members. So I don't know if you have any comment on that, but I just did want to make a note for anyone who happens to see a mysterious Craigslist ad advertising for someone to basically file code enforcement complaints. Please beware. Go ahead.
Right, I was just going to say, there's clearly individuals who have an agenda. So they are using emails, public records, and social media to try to advance their agenda. We don't react any more or any less to those. We get a complaint, we look at it, and if it's valid, we deal with it, and we don't weigh in the person's motivations, whether they have good or bad intentions, they have a agenda or don't have an agenda. The reason we do not take a complaint and cite somebody is because we realize that there's the possibility that someone does have an agenda or a nefarious motivation. So that's why we send out an inspector to look at the complaint to see if it's in fact valid, to see if it in fact violates the town's codes as they are written, and proceed from there. Obviously, the worst situation that we can have from a staff perspective is to have codes that say this is not allowed to be done and to be asked to selectively enforce that. You know, we would encourage the council that if there's any code that you feel is too strict or not necessary, that you remove it from the books, so that everyone out there in the public knows what the expectations are, and of course then staff knows what their jobs are. So we will continue to try to educate people as to the code and its requirements. And sometimes, unfortunately, the best education comes from sending them a notice of violation so that they realize it's a serious matter, getting them to the table and trying to work out a solution for them. I think, Madam Mayor, you and I have been involved with one of those this week, and we encourage other people who are similarly situated to reach out to us, and we'll try to work out something so they understand that what the mistake they made, and show them a path forward prospectively. So to the extent that that occurs, we will continue to try to do that with, of course, the council's support.
I'd like to request an update from the Roar Offshore people. You know, there was talk about donations that were going to be made to different groups. I'd like a wrap-up presentation from them, where they could tell us what they think the attendance was, what were the high points. I know, Roger, you had said that the things that we worried about weren't all turned out well. Parking, trash, our end of our concerns all functioned well, but I would just like to know from a report from them, essentially. Maybe the chamber might like to chime in on their end of it too, just so we have an idea. There was also, I've gotten a few emails relative to something that was stated that the Roar Offshore Group had a 20-year contract with Fort Myers Beach, and they have no contract with Fort Myers Beach, the town of. They may have a contract to do that race with Roar Offshore, with the offshore group, but we don't know. So just be nice to have them if you could arrange that, Roger.
Yes, Madam Mayor, just on that point, we have a debriefing set up with them next week with all the governmental entities.
Great.
In your comments about issues to be discussed, I will tell you that they would have benefited from someone like the vice mayor who knows how to stage people to get them on. They could have done a better job there, and we'll be discussing that with them during this debriefing.
Good.
But that being said, we will, at the meeting we're having with the staff and them to cover the debriefing, we'll extend that invitation to come speak in front of council.
Great. And if any of the sheriff or fire, any of the other entities have some feedback for us, it would be nice to hear that also. Then my next question is the RMA group for the branding. Have we heard anything from them? When
I
are
think
they
we have a
starting?
discussion with them today or tomorrow? Tomorrow.
A discussion with them tomorrow, so.
And that's basically the schedule, to try to nail down the schedule of the upcoming meetings and those types of things, so we can get them published, so people are aware of them and can get them on their calendar.
Great, okay, because we want to like do this work in the next few months.
they understand that we're extremely anxious to get this done because we have other things that are going to be piggybacking on whatever concepts the council approves.
Okay. Then the other thing I wanted to know was an update on, we had budgeted money for the LDC comp plan, glitches, updates, whatever. When is that going to come about? Have we hired a consultant? Are we thinking about it? What's the plan there?
Yeah, well, the plan there is to have a consultant handle, not have staff handle it, because again, we want the staff to concentrate on the work that comes in every
Right.
day, but to hire a staff to hire a consultant to do that. And I believe that's in progress. I don't know if they've actually been, awarded a contract. It'd probably have to come to council, so that, because probably of the dollar amount, but I'll find out about that and I'll send you out an email.
Excellent. Okay, I
Excuse
just
me
don't
on
want
that.
to.
Didn't we have something in last year's budget to do a study?
I don't remember if it was last year's budget or not, but we've talked about this, and I just don't want these things to fall through. And this is a biggie, and it's a biggie especially with several issues by members of this council that I'd like to have resolved before the next council comes on. Yeah.
Can I answer Council Butcher's point?
Yes, please.
Okay, Counselor, there were 3 things to be done in that study group for community development. And there was amount of money allocated to do sort of 2 out of the 3 things. And the decision that was made to compromise was, rather than do a top-to-bottom review of the LPA, the Land Development
LDC.
Code, and see what impacts it might have on the comp plan, was to do it via the glitch method. In this budget year, everyone realized that, I think, as a result of last year's effort, was that there just are too many glitches. And it really, due to time and the number of glitches, it really does, and the fact that the Land Development Code, each section seems to touch 3 other sections because of perhaps the way it was written, that really a top-to-bottom review is the better way to approach it. So that was funded this year. So we're now in the stage that the mayor was bringing up, which is to bring aboard the consultant to actually do that.
Maybe it was a parking study I was thinking of.
Parking study I believe is being presented to you. Michelle, do you remember, is that at the M&P or at next council meeting? I can't quite remember which, but I think it's within the next 2 meetings.
129, excellent. Okay, I don't have anything else.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, sir?
If I may. Just to remind, I know you all know this, but if you do receive an email from any anonymous source or otherwise that implies or suggests that it includes a public records request, obviously please forward that to the clerk or to the manager so staff can follow up to the extent that it does constitute a public records request before you archive it.
Michelle is almost always copied on those. I mean, she's always listed on it, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
yes,
always
just trying
check
to
and make
come-
sure if it's a
yeah.
legal matter that you were copied, if it's a 10-minute.
All right, so just, I hate to spend another minute on it, but just to be clear, we provide records, we don't necessarily answer questions. So in those emails, you'll usually see a combination of requests for records and questions. We're obligated to provide public records, we're not necessarily obligated to answer those questions. So you may see my question didn't get answered, or it's been this long and I haven't gotten an answer to my question, and some of those questions just don't warrant an answer.
Okay, it's 11:23. May I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. There's 2 seconds and 2 motions.
There we go. We
It's
won out here.
11:23, and hearing no objection, we're adjourned. Until this afternoon, when we meet with the FAA
At 1:30.
at 1:30. Thank you, Amy.